Hey guys, tonight we travel back way back to the ancient deserts of Persia where the air smells of sun-baked earth and rose petals, and where, believe it or not, people figured out how to make and store ice long before electricity was even a glimmer of a dream. You're in a land where the sun rises hard and hot, and by noon it's as if you're walking on the roof of the world's biggest brick oven. And yet, someone somewhere is sipping something cold, suspiciously cold. Your feet crunch softly along a narrow path of packed dust, still cool from the night. In the shimmering distance, a cluster of strange dome-like structures rises from the desert like fat sleeping giants. These are yakhchals, the ancient Persian ice houses. Their pale mud-plastered walls catch the early light and throw long shadows across the sand. You blink, wondering if your eyes are playing tricks on you. Ice here. You're sweating just thinking about it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly, your sandals kicking up dust toward the nearest dome. A soft breeze carries the smell of cumin and old straw. From somewhere behind the yakshal comes the faint clink of metal on stone and low voice humming a tune older than memory. The sun is creeping up now, gold and sharp. The villagers are waking, but the ice has already been hard at work through the night. Let's rewind a bit. Imagine you're born in the city of Yas, central Persia, surrounded by dry mountains and sand dunes that stretch like rumpled parchment to the horizon. Summers are so hot here, clay roof tiles crack. And yet, your grandmother swears she had chilled fruit in July pulled from the belly of the earth. You grow up watching the domes change color with the light pale pink in the morning, glowing ochre by noon and fading to ghostly white under the stars. They look like alien hives or overturned bowls, oddly soothing in their stillness. You're told they hold secrets, but no one ever explains them clearly, just a knowing look. A tap on the nose and it keeps the cold in. Today you wake just before dawn and decide to find out for yourself. You sneak out while the rooster is still thinking about his day toes chilled on the flagstones. The path to the yakchal is quiet except for the occasional hiss of wind brushing the dry grass. You bring a lamp, though the sky is already blooming a sleepy lavender. You reach the dome and circle it slowly. Its walls slope steeply, maybe 30 feet tall, narrowing to a hole at the very top. You run a hand along the wall, coarse, cool, and slightly moist. Not the kind of surface you'd expect in a desert. This isn't just any mud. It's made of sarouj, a Persian blend of clay, ash, sand, goat hair, and lime. Why goat hair? That's a long story involving texture, tensile strength, and a goat named Parviz who probably didn't sign up for this. But the result is waterproof, breathable, and just insulative enough to make magic. At the base of the dome is a narrow arched door just tall enough for you to duck through. Inside, it's still silent and dark. A hollow echo brushes your ears as you step onto packed earth. The air smells faintly of minerals and cold water. You inhale and shiver. Actual, honest-to-Zeus coolness. Historians still argue whether these structures were primarily communal temple-affiliated or royal. Each village seems to have done it their own way. But one thing's clear, yakshals weren't just buildings. They were a system, a ritual, a desert dance between temperature timing and teamwork. And you're about to become part of that tradition. As you listen, the hush of the structure begins to feel protective, even maternal. You place a hand on the inner wall, cool and slightly damp. Someone spent days crafting this layer by hand. No machines, no insulation foam, just mud math and moonlight. You think of the absurdity of it all, ice in a desert without electricity. Try explaining that to your smartphone. There's something else too, a fringe theory whispered by an old man in the market. He claims the yakchals were first inspired by observing desert fox dens where air circulates in quiet spirals and water condenses on walls. Is it true? Who knows? But as you breathe in that oddly calming underground air, it feels plausible. After all, humans are excellent copycats when survival's on the line. You hear footsteps behind you. The ice makers have arrived. They nod to you curious but not unfriendly and begin checking the walls, tapping here, feeling there. Their hands know this dome like a favorite story. One of them, a wiry man with sun-cracked lips, gestures to the pit in the center. Last night's freeze, he says in a voice as dusty as the road. You lean over. Sure enough, there's a glimmer of frost. You want to help? He asks with a grin. Do you too late? He hands you a long wooden paddle. The paddle is heavier than it looks, rough with years of handling, its edges worn smooth by 1,000 careful scrapes. You grip it awkwardly, but the man just chuckles and shows you how to ease it under a glistening slab of ice that formed overnight in the shallow trench at the center of the yacht's floor. It looks like glass kissed by moonlight, thin but solid, a miracle of physics and patience. You kneel, careful not to slip, and feel the coolness radiate up through your knees. The man gestures to the other paddlers, and together they begin to lift yesterday's ice, now hardened, into thick blocks and stack it gently near the wall. Each slab is wrapped in straw and burlap, thick layers of insulation that smell like a donkey's bad haircut. There's a practiced rhythm to it. You scrape, you lift, you stack, you sweat, but somehow the air remains gentle and dry. This is not a place of urgency, it's a place of precision. Outside, the sun is rising fast, turning the sand a blinding gold. But inside this domed chamber, you might as well be on another planet. The Yakchal keeps secrets of cold, of craft, and of cooperation. The ice makers are a special breed. No one becomes one by accident. You don't just wake up and decide, today I shall wrangle ice from thin air. These are men who've learned from their fathers and their fathers before them. Their hands are calloused but careful. Their eyes know how to read clouds for signs of a good freeze. They tell stories in murmurs as they work, of the winter the pool froze so hard it cracked. Of the summer they kept ice until August. And it's not just ice they handle, it's respect. In this world, ice is both ordinary and precious. You can't drink too much cold water, it'll make your stomach complain. But having it means you've tamed the desert, if only for a while. You step back and watch as they roll a slab into a narrow chute that leads downward. That chute connects to a deeper pit beneath the dome, lined with more insulation and sealed with a clay cap. That ice will stay frozen for months. Maybe longer. A form of time travel preserved in crystal. One of the men pours you a cup of something that tastes like cold tea and honeyed dust. He offers you a seat on a stone ledge as the morning sunlight begins to filter through the narrow vent at the top of the dome. It lands on the ice in scattered halos like light through stained glass. You know why it works, he asks, and you shake your head. Hot air rises. Cold air sinks. Simple as that. So we built a place where the cold sinks and stays. And that's just the beginning. He waves toward the entrance. But it doesn't work alone. You have to start outside. You finish the tea and follow him back into the sun. There beside the dome is a wide, shallow trench lined with smooth stone. It stretches long and narrow like a lazy aqueduct. This is the ice-making field. At night, when the stars stretch like spilled sugar across the sky, and the wind dies down to a whisper, this trench fills with water. Just a few inches deep anymore, and it won't freeze. The desert does something strange in winter. It gets bitterly cold at night. With no clouds to trap warmth, the heat vanishes like a magician's scarf. The shallow water chills fast, freezes fast, and can be harvested before dawn. That's how it works. Water by day, ice by night, if you know how to read the sky. But that's not all. You lean closer and see faint ridges carved into the trench's edges. Shadow breaks. Subtle but effective. They block the sun in the morning delay, melting and funnel cold air back toward the ice house. Clever, precise, almost smug. Most people think we had no science, the man says, squinting into the light. But this is science. It just doesn't wear a lab coat. He scratches his chin and adds, historians still argue whether we borrowed these methods from the Medes, or if they go back even earlier. Some say the Assyrians froze water in clay pots. Others think the idea came from Babylonian priests who needed cold for rituals. Who knows? He shrugs. But this we figured out ourselves. The sun's higher now, and the trench gleams with a shallow film of fresh water. You imagine it tonight glittering under a silent moon, transforming into something both fragile and powerful. One of the younger workers joins you. He's maybe 16 and already as sure-footed as a goat. My grandfather says the yakshal listens. He says softly as if the dome has ears. If you walk too fast, if you shout, inside it punishes you. You raise an eyebrow. I dropped a paddle once, he continues. Cracked the ice. Got nothing that night. Nothing. Is that true, maybe? Maybe not, but you nod all the same. There's something sacred in this slowness, in this devotion to cold in a place that begs for heat. Another man calls out. It's time to seal the chamber. They stack fresh ice inside, layer it with straw, and plug the narrow chute with clay. Someone draws a chalk symbol on the wall, half ritual, half inventory. You don't ask what it means. As you walk back toward the village, the dome looms behind you. Quiet, squat, and radiant. It doesn't need to explain itself. It just exists, doing what it's always done, holding chill against all odds. And tomorrow it will do it again. The next morning, your curiosity is still simmering like water just before it boils. You rise early again, pulling on your sandals with the quiet urgency of someone on a mission. The dawn sky is blushing pink, and the air carries that familiar chill that vanishes the moment the sun gets cocky. You make your way back toward the yakchal, but this time, instead of ducking inside the dome, you're guided around to the back by one of the ice makers. He gestures towards something unexpected, an ancient aqueduct snaking its way across the desert like a sleepy serpent. This, he says with the pride of a man showing off a secret family recipe, is where the real magic begins. You're looking at a qanat, a brilliant gravity-fed underground canal that draws water from the mountains far away. These qanats are some of ancient Persia's greatest unsung inventions. Imagine digging a tunnel gently sloping over many kilometers with nothing but primitive tools and a sense of stubborn optimism. You glance at the surface, little more than a dotted line of ventilation shafts poking out of the sand like forgotten wells. The water in a qanat travels underground, protected from the sun, preserving its chill. It trickles silently into the village invisible until it spills gently into a pool near the Yakchal's trench system. There's no roaring river here, just a murmuring thread of life, cool and consistent, whispering beneath your feet. Historians still debate how the Persians managed to align these subterranean channels so precisely over such long distances. Some credit early astronomy. Others believe it was sheer trial and error, mixed with an uncanny feel for soil and slope. You imagine a group of surveyors squinting at the stars, digging tasting dirt, adjusting by a fraction of a degree until the water finally obeys. And you're just trying not to fall into one of the access holes. You follow the water's gentle course until it meets a small square reservoir lined with stone. It's surprisingly deep shaded by a grove of gnarly trees that have no business being so green. This is the source pool where water collects before it's channeled out to the ice trench at night. Nearby, a woman in a dusty blue tunic is skimming debris from the surface with a woven basket. She hums a tune that sounds older than the language you speak. If the water's dusty, she explains without looking up, the ice is brittle. Good ice needs good water, even in dreams. You sit under a fig tree chewing on a piece of dried apricot, watching the day unfold like a lazy cat. It's almost funny how much effort goes into making something as simple as ice. But that's the thing, isn't it? Ice isn't simple when you don't have a plug to shove in a wall. It's a treasure, a transformation. It turns people into engineers, artists, and, if we're being honest, slightly obsessive weather watchers. You ask the woman how they know when it's a good night for freezing. She taps her temple. Experience, she says, then with a grin and chicken bones. You blink, not for magic, just dinner. But if they snap clean, it'll be cold enough. Modern meteorology may not approve, but there's something delightfully poetic about poultry-based forecasting. You stroll back toward the dome, where a few workers are already preparing for tonight's freeze. They spread a thin layer of water across the trench, measure its depth with their fingers, then stand back, like artists critiquing their own brushstrokes. The sun's climbing now a little less kindly. You can feel the shift warmth pushing out the last remnants of morning chill. One of the men leads you to a smaller, half-buried chamber beside the main dome. Storage, he says, but not just for ice. Inside, it's cool and fragrant, packed with terracotta jars sealed with wax and cloth. He lifts the lid on one and offers you a peek. Dates soaked in rosewater. Another jar holds dried citrus peel, and a third, pickled onions that smell both terrible and amazing. This is how we cheat summer, he says, wiping his hands. Cool food, cold drink, and a story that doesn't spoil. It hits you, then this isn't just about preserving temperature. It's about preserving dignity, flavor, life. In a climate where the sun can turn a melon to mush in hours, the ability to slow decay is revolutionary. You're beginning to see the bigger picture now. The Yakchal isn't a standalone structure. It's a node in a web of Connaught's trench systems, seasonal rhythms, and communal knowledge. It's more organism than object, and you're a cell in it for today at least. Just before lunch, a group of children races past chasing a goat that is definitely not supposed to be out. One boy carries a small shard of ice like a prize, holding it high above his head as it melts down his arm. You smile, remembering the way your own fingers felt this morning grazing that cold dome wall. As the goat disappears into a garden patch, you're left with the quiet murmur of water, the scent of earth and herbs, and the knowledge that somewhere beneath your feet, water is flowing, preparing to become tomorrow's miracle. You press your palm against the dome's outer wall again, still cool even in the heat. Still waiting. By now, your sandals are full of dust, your hair smells like clay, and your brain is trying to reconcile everything you've just seen with the modern world you left behind. You're standing next to a dome of ancient engineering brilliance, and not a single screw wire or button is in sight. Still, it works, quietly, perfectly. Today, your guide leads you away from the Yakchal not far, just down a gently sloping path to where the older villagers gather, under a pergola draped with grapevines. They're weaving baskets, repairing tools, and telling stories the same way you'd share memes, just with fewer cats and a lot more dates. One elder waves you over and pats the stone beside him. His fingers are curled and spotted with age, but they still move deftly. He picks up a curved tile and says, "Let me tell you about wind. You're already hooked. The badger or wind catcher is a cousin of the Yakchal in purpose, if not in shape." These tower-like structures rise above the rooftops of homes and storage buildings, open on one or more sides, catching breezes and funneling them downward through narrow shafts. The air moves, it cools, and it exits again, dragging out heat like a cranky house guest. Your guide explains that many Yakchals were built with wind catchers incorporated, subtly helping to ventilate the storage pit below and coaxing even the slightest breeze down into the dome's cool embrace. You ever try to sleep in the summer without one? The old man grins. You'd rather cuddle a cactus. Historians still argue whether the Badgir design came from Persia originally or if it spread in from Mesopotamia or Egypt. Some think it was a happy accident, a hole in a roof that turned into an innovation. Others insist it was intentional from day one. Either way, it's an elegant solution in a land where air conditioners are still centuries away from existing. And here's the best part, it works using nothing but air pressure. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. The wind does all the math. You follow him into his home, a modest space made of mud brick, thick-walled and fragrant with saffron and cumin. There's a bajir here too, rising up from the roof like a chimney in reverse. As you sit on a cushioned bench, you feel the air shift gentle, steady like a sleeping breath. It's not cold, but it's definitely cooler. Natural climate control 100% unplugged. He pours you a drink, iced, of course. Mint and cucumber clinking with cubes chipped from this morning's harvest. You sip and smile. If this is boring ancient history, it's doing a terrible job of being boring. The conversation drifts to how Yakchals fit into daily life. You'd think ice would be hoarded, saved for the elite, or reserved for rituals, but that's not quite the case. While nobles certainly had more access, even common folk got their share. The system was communal, the storage was shared. And the cooling wasn't just about comfort, it was about medicine, preservation, and survival. They used ice to soothe fevers, to store goat's milk a few days longer, to make sweet cold desserts during no-ruse celebrations that tasted like spring itself had learned how to freeze. You try something called faluda, a noodle-like frozen treat made with rosewater and lime. It crunches delicately between your teeth, a floral, icy explosion that almost makes you forget you're sitting in a house made of earth and straw. Back then, the elder says between bites, cold meant more than comfort. It meant you were winning against nature. Just a little. It's getting late now. The light slants lower, warmer, painting the Badgir in gold and shadow. You thank your host and step back into the alley, the air already beginning to cool for real. There's a sense of anticipation in the village, like everyone's holding their breath. Tonight's forecast, you've been told, is promising. A deep chill, good ice. Back at the trench, workers are trickling in. They bring water in leather skins, pouring it gently into the channels. A boy sprinkles powdered ash along the edges, not magic, just to discourage curious birds from taking an evening dip. Someone's roasting chestnuts. Someone else is tuning a ney flute. It feels less like a work site and more like a quiet festival. And you, you find your same spot by the Yakchal wall, back resting against ancient mud brick that's seen more winters than you've had birthdays. The windcatcher above hums faintly, catching the last whispers of daylight. One of the ice makers leans over and murmurs, "Stay up with us. Watch the freeze. It's better than a lullaby." You nod and pull your cloak tighter. Not because you're cold, but because you're becoming part of something. Something cool. The stars arrive before the frost. They flicker into view one by one, like someone slowly dimming the ceiling of the sky. You lie back against the slope of the trench, the earth still warm beneath you, the air crisping by degrees. Around you, the village hushes not into silence, but into softness. A low murmur here, a chuckle there, the occasional rustle of date palms shivering in the breeze. It's bedtime, but for the ice makers, the night is just getting started. You're handed a thin woolen shawl and a warm, honey-sweet biscuit that tastes suspiciously like breakfast dressed in pajamas. A woman passes by with a long wooden stick and taps the surface of the water in the trench, listening. "Still too loose," she mutters. "You tap too. It ripples like glass pretending to be soup." "Not yet, but soon." You watch as the workers take their places like a ritual theater troupe. Someone clears debris. Someone else walks the perimeter checking for curious animals or children who haven't gone home yet. There's no leader, no shouted orders, just a silent choreography that feels older than the dome itself. And finally, the cold comes. Not a bite, but a slow unfurling. It wraps itself around your ankles first, then your arms, then the tip of your nose. You exhale and see your breath bloom in front of you. Frost begins to whisper along the trench's edge. Water becomes slush, then glints, then settles into stillness. This is when you don't breathe too hard at teen jokes beside you. Or it thinks you're trying to melt it. You peer closer. The trench water is glazing over. Not all at once, ice flowers out from the edges, spreading like ink on a napkin, slowly, steadily, until the whole surface shimmers like captured moonlight. It's quiet, reverent, and if we're being honest, completely mesmerizing. You lean closer. A thin layer now covers the entire trench. One of the ice makers gives a soft nod of approval, then gently places a flat reed mat across one section. It helps regulate the freeze, they say, but also keeps out nosy cats. Fair enough. It's astonishing, isn't it? In the middle of a desert with no electricity, no pumps, no artificial cooling, just geometry, physics, and nightfall, they're making ice. Historians still argue whether the Yakshal was more about utility or status. Some suggest it was a display of dominance over nature. Look what we can freeze. Others argue it was purely practical, a reliable way to keep perishables cool, store medicine, and provide a literal chill pill in a land baked half the year. You suspect it's both. The Persians weren't above a little flexing. You stretch your legs just a bit. Not too much, you don't want to disturb the balance. The trench is now fully iced, a clean sheet that glints under the moon like a giant frosty tongue. You wonder if anyone's ever tried skating on it. Your companion grins, reading your thoughts. "We tried once," he whispers. "Didn't end well. Broken pots, angry chickens. The next part is more delicate. Once the layer is thick enough, at least a finger deep, it's cut into slabs, using tools that look like wooden spatulas with sharp edges. The slabs are slid across bamboo rollers and gently stacked inside the dome. Tonight's freeze isn't thick enough for cutting yet. The workers simply sit watching, warming their hands on tiny charcoal pots and waiting for the final hardening. The whole village seems to exhale in sync. You're left with your thoughts and your feet, which are now officially cold. But you don't care. You're part of something timeless, elemental, and also slightly ridiculous because you're still amazed people could outwit desert heat, using little more than holes in the ground and good timing. Someone passes around a clay cup of warm saffron milk. You sip it slowly. It tastes like gold dust and comfort, and it fogs your nose just enough to make the moment even sleepier. You glance at the dome, its smooth, sloping silhouette now silvered under moonlight. A few bats flit overhead, probably disappointed there's no fruit. One lands briefly on the badger, then zips away like it remembered it left the stove on. You wonder how many nights like this the dome has seen. Hundreds, thousands. You imagine ancient hands pouring water, whispering to the stars, laughing over freezing fingers and stubborn frost. Ice in the desert, what a beautiful contradiction. Like a lullaby sung in a war zone or a whisper that cools the skin. The elder you met earlier reappears. He kneels, brushes frost from the edge of the trench, and lays a soft cloth over a small section. The old ice gods like to be tucked in. He jokes, then rises slowly with a groan. And now, we let them sleep. The others nod, stretch, and begin to head home. The freeze is done. The night's harvest will be inspected at dawn. Any ice thick enough will be cut and stored. The rest left to melt and tried again tomorrow. You stay a moment longer, not ready to leave. Not just yet. The air is still. The stars are smug, and your breath still fogs in the cold. You reach down and touch the ice. It's solid. So are you. Morning in the desert is never in a hurry. It doesn't burst in like a city sunrise. No alarms, no car horns. Just a slow, honeyed light that pours over the village rooftops and nudges you awake like a warm cat curling against your back. You blink yourself into consciousness, limbs a little stiff from sleeping near the trench. And your first instinct is to check the ice. It's still there. Still solid. And still impressive, if only because everything around it is warming up fast. Already the edges are starting to glisten just a bit. The workers arrive again just before the sun gets too assertive, ready to harvest what the desert night has offered. There's no fanfare, no dramatic music, just quiet motion and practiced hands. You watch as they ease broad, paddle-like blades under the surface layer. The ice cracks like porcelain with a crisp, satisfying sound. Then comes the sled, the kind that doesn't belong in a snowy forest, but somehow still makes perfect sense here. It's a flat board with rope handles pulled by a pair of teenage boys grinning like they're about to prank someone. Slab by slab, they transfer the ice into the yawning mouth of the yakchal. The inside is a different world entirely. Ducking through the narrow entrance, you're greeted with a sudden coolness that brushes against your face like a polite ghost. The interior smells faintly of earth and lime plaster, and you feel like you've stepped into a secret. The pit at the center of the floor descends deep below ground, lined with bricks arranged in spiraling rings. Ice is being lowered down by hand, stacked carefully so the cold stays trapped. And yes, they're doing it barefoot. Better grip, someone shrugs when you point it out. Historians still argue how much ice these things could hold at once. Some estimates suggest up to 1/800 cubic meters. That's about 500,000 pounds of ice, or in modern terms enough to chill 1.3 million iced coffees. You mentally raise your ceramic travel mug in tribute. One of the workers points to a ring embedded in the wall, an old iron hook once used to hang a pulley system for deeper loads. It's rusted now, but still sturdy, just like everything here. But here's the quirky bit, not all yakchals were used just for ice. Some doubled as storage for perishable goods like meat, dairy, or even precious herbs. In some cases, people believe they were also used as morgues during the hottest months. A little chilling, sure, but practical. You try not to imagine being the guy assigned to that delivery. Your host from yesterday joins you smiling, chewing something sweet and sticky. Want to help break it up, he asks, nodding toward a chunk of freshly harvested ice. You nod, take the wooden mallet he hands you, and strike. The crack echoes satisfyingly off the curved walls. Good sound, he says, means it froze deep. You laugh and keep going, trying not to slip. It's strange how quickly something like this starts to feel normal. Just you, some villagers, an ancient fridge carved out of dirt, and the sound of breaking ice. Better than a spa day, honestly. Outside, the sun climbs higher. The team works faster now. The slabs are smaller, some melting at the edges. A boy drops one, and it shatters like sugar glass. No scolding, just a quick sweep and a fresh start. They've done this too many times to get bothered. You ask about the tools why they haven't changed in centuries because they still work. Someone shrugs. Why fix what the sky helps freeze? Fair point. One of the elders explains the dome's lime-based plaster. It wasn't just slapped on like paint, it was cooked in huge kilns mixed with ash and clay, then spread layer by layer to seal the dome. The outer surface reflects sunlight while the thick walls insulate. It's breathable but sealed, not unlike your favorite camping thermos. And that little opening at the top, the oculus. It's not just for decoration. Hot air escapes through it during the day, and at night it helps regulate the airflow. Sometimes they close it with a vented cover. Other times they let the stars peek in. You climb a small ladder to peer into the pit again. The ice gleams faintly in the shadows. Some chunks are wrapped in thick burlap, ready for transport. Others will stay here for weeks or even months, carefully stacked and monitored. In high summer, when the ground is too warm to freeze anything, these cold reserves become invaluable. You can almost hear someone whispering to a child, "Drink your water slowly, the ice won't last forever." Just before leaving the dome, you see something etched into the wall, tiny marks like a calendar. Each line for a successful freeze, someone tells you. We count blessings that way. You nod and step outside. The day is bright now, the sky wide and endless. And somewhere in the middle of this arid, sun-blasted plain, a small team of humans has just quietly pulled a miracle from the ground. You wonder if the modern world would be better off if we still relied on the night on geometry, on listening to air, and watching for frost. If maybe instead of reinventing everything, we sometimes just needed to remember. There's no switch to flip when the ice is ready, no beep, no alert. But the village knows. You can feel it in the way people start to move. Markets open earlier, donkeys clomp along with extra baskets, and suddenly everyone's holding something cold, like it's a miracle in a bowl. Because honestly, it is. You're ushered toward a shaded courtyard where preparations are underway. Today is Bazaar Day, and not just any Bazaar Day, it's Ice Day. A few times each month during the cooler seasons, slabs are pulled from the Yakchal and carted to nearby markets before the heat can melt them back into memory. You tag along as a cart lined with straw and shaded by an old cotton cloth rattles down a dusty road toward town. The driver, an old man with a voice like dry parchment, tells you this route's been taken for over 1,000 years. And the road's had the same pothole for most of them, he mutters, bouncing slightly in his seat. The cart carries 3 big chunks of ice partially wrapped and dripping slightly. Beside them, a box of clay pots filled with something you can't quite place. The man winks. You'll taste it later. The market hums as you arrive low and warm like bees having a conversation. Stalls spill over with dried fruits, copper trinkets, fabrics dyed in improbable blues and reds. But the crowd seems magnetized by one spot, the ice vendor. He's not selling the ice itself, of course, not directly. Ice is more often bartered or used for special orders, preserving meat for travel, cooling rare medicines, or making that one treat everyone waits for. And here it comes faluda. That's what those mysterious pots held thin vermicelli noodles soaked in a syrup of sugar and rosewater mixed with crushed ice. It's sweet floral and cold enough to stop time. You take a bite. It's otherworldly. It's also ancient. Faluda was first recorded in Persia as far back as 400 BCE. Some food historians still argue whether it was originally a medicinal tonic or just dessert. Either way, it works. You take another bite and feel your molars buzz. Worth it. Nearby, a young girl buys a scoop for her grandmother. Another stall uses the ice to keep goat cheese from going runny. A man with a long beard fans a clay jar that rests in a shallow basin of meltwater, an ancient cooling trick. The jar sweats, he explains, and sweating keeps it cool, like humans, only less dramatic. It's everywhere this borrowed cold, and it moves fast. The ice won't last the day. By mid-afternoon, the edges will soften, drip, vanish. Some merchants use it for just a few hours of chill before they're back to sun-wilted vegetables and warm yogurt. Others hoard the precious cool in clay cellars, their shop floors sunken to trap the cold air. You peek into one and it smells faintly of pickles and dust. Delightful. One shopkeeper beckons you over and points to a basket. Inside is something wrapped in silk. delicate round a pale green. Melon, he says. Frozen, for weddings only. You ask how he keeps it frozen. He grins and taps the floor. Magic? Of course it's not magic, it's thermodynamics and centuries of ingenuity. But you let him have his moment. He's earned it. What's remarkable is how seamlessly ice has woven into the culture here, not as an everyday luxury, but as a special ingredient in celebration, healing, preservation. It's valued because it's rare, and because it demands patience. Back at the Yakchal, the workers are preparing another trench for freezing. Tonight, they'll try again, and again the next night, and the next. Sometimes they fail. Clouds roll in, winds shift, or a dog drinks half the trench. It happens they shrug. There's a gentle relentlessness to it all. Like farming, but with fewer cucumbers and more waiting around in the cold. You can't rush a freeze. You can only invite it, prepare for it, and hope it shows up. And sometimes it doesn't. Historians still debate just how reliable these systems were. In wetter, colder years, the ice flowed. In dry, windless ones, not so much. Some towns built multiple yakchals. Others imported ice from mountains or froze water in animal skin bags at higher altitudes, then hauled it down like contraband. Even now, in the few villages that maintain the tradition, success depends on things you can't plug in or control. You pass an elder selling slices of cantaloupe chilled in yakchal ice. Want some, she asks. It's been waiting all winter. You say yes, because who turns down a centuries-old fruit popsicle? By late afternoon, the ice vendor has packed up. What remains of the day's harvest is melting back into water, sopped up by straw, or slowly vanishing into air. You sit under a fig tree and sip mint tea cooled with one last sliver. The cart heads home empty, but content. A small miracle delivered, traded, eaten, and gone. Until tomorrow. And you've seen the invisible thread that connects ancient domes, frozen desserts, wedding melons, and cantankerous carts with no suspension. It's ice. But more than that, it's the idea that even in heat you can find cool, with enough patience, and a good trench. You stay a few extra days in the village, not because you have to, but because something about the pace starts to sink into your bones. The Yakchal, with its quiet nobility, feels less like a building now, and more like an elder full of stories weathered, but still doing its job without fuss. And tonight there's another freeze attempt. The trench has been cleared and leveled again. Fresh water hauled earlier from the Konat sits still and mirror-like in the stone basin. You join the familiar crew as they settle in for another night of tending the cold. The air is crisp, already a good sign. Stars blink overhead, and the dome watches silently, a stony guardian of chilly ambitions. This time, though, there's a twist. Tonight's water is slightly salted. Why? Because as one elder puts it, salt argues with water. And when they fight, things get colder. A charming way to describe it, but rooted in chemistry. Adding salt actually lowers the freezing point of water. But the method here is counterintuitive. Instead of making ice colder, they're trying to control the rate of freezing. The theory is that a tiny bit of salt might create stronger, denser slabs ice that melt slower in transit. Historians still argue whether ancient Persians actually used this method intentionally, or if it was just a side effect of local mineral water. But in this village, it's lore. And that's enough. You crouch by the trench watching your reflection shimmer. The silence stretches wide and deep, like the desert itself. The only sounds are soft voices, the occasional creak of wood, and someone unwrapping flatbread filled with something suspiciously crunchy. You accept a bite, it's pickled turnip. Weirdly excellent. Tonight, the conversation drifts to maintenance. Yakchals, you learn, require a specific kind of attention. It's not constant no 24/7 alerts or urgent calls from malfunctioning thermostats, but it's consistent. Each spring, a team scrapes the interior walls and reapplies plaster. The formula includes sand clay, ash goat hair for binding, and sometimes crushed ceramics to reflect more sunlight. The process takes days, and it smells awful. Like wet goats, and ambition one teenager jokes. But it works. You walk with one of the elders around the dome's base, where they show you hairline cracks sealed with thick lime bands. The dome shifts with heat, he explains. We patch it so it breathes but doesn't break. And if it does break, Well, he says then we cry a little. Then we build another. Simple enough. Another common repair, the vent at the top. Birds love it. So does wind. Over time, debris can clog the opening, and that disrupts airflow. Too much heat buildup in the dome, and your ice turns into a very disappointing puddle. You're shown a long, curved stick with a cloth bundle at the end. Ancient chimney sweep tech, basically. Effective. And somehow oddly graceful. Back at the trench, a faint film of frost begins to form. Not a full sheet yet, but promising. The crew doesn't cheer, they don't even smile. They just nod, refill their tea, and wait. Like gamblers who've bet on the night itself. You ask about other yachtchols nearby. There used to be 5, someone says. Now only 2 work. One collapsed, one became a goat house. You pause. Goat house? Yes, he shrugs. It was shady and big. Goats like shade. So now it's their palace. You make a mental note to visit that next. Yachtchols, as it turns out, were once far more common. Spread across the Persian Empire from modern-day Iran to parts of Afghanistan and Turkmenistan. Not all survived. Some were destroyed in war. Others fell to disuse as refrigeration arrived. But the ones that remain, they're still standing because someone chose to keep them alive. Maintenance isn't glamorous, but it's quiet proof of value. Kind of like flossing, or replacing a phone battery before it explodes. And it's not just the structure, it's the system. The qanats, the harvesting tools, the rituals around freezing and stacking. Even the folklore. One elder recalls a legend about a yachtchal that hummed like a drum when the ice was perfect. Not true, she admits, but still a good story. You nod. Every old technology needs a few ghost stories to feel complete. Midnight nears. The air dips further. You rub your hands together not because you're cold, but because everyone else is doing it and you want to fit in. The frost has spread across the trench now, a soft, crystalline skin that shivers with each passing breeze. Tomorrow they'll test it, and maybe harvest again, or maybe not. But that's the beauty of it. The yachtchal asks for patience, for attention, and for acceptance that not every night is the right one. But the next one might be. You lie back on the packed earth, eyes on the sky ice forming slowly behind you, and think. This is refrigeration at 1/4 horsepower. And it works just fine. You wake up to the smell of dust warming in sunlight and something faintly sweet, dates maybe, or the tail end of breakfast bread, crisped over a fire. The frost from the trench solid. The crew nods approvingly already halfway through their morning tea. But today your guide has a different plan. We're going upstream, he says, tapping a spot on a hand-drawn map that looks like it was sketched on the back of a napkin from 500 BCE. You follow him up a slope past fig trees and a sloping orchard of pistachios. The ground here is soft, sandy, but spotted with stones the size of your fist. As you crest a small rise, you finally see it. A Qanat mother well. You might have heard of Qanats in passing, maybe in a dusty documentary or on some museum placard you only half read. But here they come, alive veins of water pulled from mountains and fed across miles with the precision of an engineer and the patience of a saint. Your guide explains as you walk. The water you saw in the trench last night, it started here, 50 meters down. Qanats are gravity-fed tunnels sloping ever so slightly from mountain aquifers to the lowland villages. Dug entirely by hand, mind you, with chisels, buckets, and the occasional prayer. How long does it take to dig one? The guide scratches his head. Depends. Some took 10 years, one took 32. And the digger's son finished it. You both peer down a vent shaft, one of the many vertical access points spaced like dots across the hills. It's deep dark and lined with cool air like the breath of the earth. You drop a pebble. It takes far too long to hit anything. Qanats don't just supply water, they regulate it. The slow descent means minimal evaporation. Water travels underground untouched by sun or sandstorm, then gently emerges at a usable temperature ready for irrigation drinking and, yes, ice making. The science is elegant, but the labor backbreaking. Digging straight and sloping requires constant calculation. Builders used simple tools, plumb bobs, wooden sighting rods, and endless patience. Historians still argue how these ancient engineers maintained such precision over miles. Some say it was sheer experience passed from father to son. Others suggest more advanced surveying tools may have existed now lost to time, or simply misinterpreted as ceremonial objects. You pass a ruined shaft collapsed centuries ago. That one was cursed, the guide says with a grin, or just poorly supported. Either way, goats won't go near it. Fair enough. At a small village higher up, you meet a man called Rahim, who still monitors the Qanat's flow. He carries a copper ladle, a short stick, and a look of deep suspicion toward anyone who flushes water too carelessly. The water, he says, belongs to time, not people, which is a poetic way to say that Qanats run on rotation. Every family gets a share of flow at specific hours, and schedules are strictly honored. Off by 10 minutes, and someone's tomatoes go thirsty. Rahim leads you to a narrow stone channel where he cups some water and offers it to you. It's icy cold, like mountain breath. You sip and nearly chip a tooth. No wonder this stuff makes great ice. Do you have electricity here, you ask? He laughs. Yes, but electricity won't flow uphill for free. You think about that. Electricity demands constant input generators, wires, fuel. Qanats. They demand only gravity and faith. Once dug, they need almost no energy to maintain. Just checks for blockage, minor cleaning, and the occasional goat rescue mission. Apparently, goats are repeat offenders. Your guide leads you further up to an abandoned Yakshal site. Only the base remains, but the trench is intact. And here's the real twist: it was built beside the Qanat, not above it. Why, you ask? Altitude. Colder nights here, the guide says. And no need to carry water up, just channel it straight from the Qanat. Genius. You sit on a stone ledge, feet dangling, and imagine workers pouring Qanat water into the trench. Ice forming quietly under starshine, stacked into the dome before dawn, packed with straw, shipped down to villages, and all of it, every drop starting from a silent tunnel carved in stubborn stone by hands long gone. The wind shifts. You smell cedar from a nearby grove. Someone's singing in the distance an old tune that rhymes water with patience, ice with grace. There's no machinery here. No hum of engines or blinking LEDs, just water, cold air, and time. And yet it works. The walk back from the upper Qanat is slow, sun-washed, and full of musings. You trace the same path the water takes, only backwards, past old aqueducts, dry figs hanging like wrinkled bells, and half-collapsed domes where wild bees have decided to move in. A few kids run by, chasing each other with bundles of reeds. One stops to show you a beetle with gold-tipped legs. Your guide, sensing your brain still stuck in Qanat mode, drops another gem. You know some cities use yakshals to cool their wind towers. You blink, wind towers. He nods. Bad gears, tall chimneys. They catch wind, push it down into houses, cool air. Works better with ice. Now that's a pairing desert refrigeration and passive AC. You learn that in wealthier Persian homes, yakshal ice wasn't just for preserving meat or chilling drinks. It was part of a whole architectural philosophy, one that treated heat not as an enemy, but a force to be redirected. Wind towers pulled breezes from above. Courtyards sank below ground to stay shaded. Water channels cooled walls. And in the fanciest setups, slabs of yakshal ice were placed in special chambers beneath the floor. Result: instant ancient HVAC. Historians still argue how effective these combinations were. Some say luxury homes stayed 15 degrees cooler. Others suggest it was more about psychological comfort than actual temperature drops. But there's one thing they all agree on: it was silent and clean, and smelled faintly of rosewater. Back in the village, you take a detour to see a still functioning badger attached to a merchant's home. The tower rises like a stone giraffe slitted at the top to catch shifting winds. Inside, it's noticeably cooler. Not refrigerator cold, but gently, sweetly bearable, like standing in shade after too long in the sun. There's a narrow room beneath the main living space. Your guide calls it the sardab. Cold room, he translates. Before fridges, this was where we stored butter. You nod. You'd store your whole self here if they'd let you. And the walls packed with bricks soaked in a muddy mix of lime and goat hair. Again, with the goat hair. By now you're convinced there's no Persian invention that doesn't owe a debt to goats. As you explore the sardab, a young woman arrives carrying a wide metal tray. On it, a jug of dough-fermented yogurt drink served over ice. Yakchal ice. You take a sip. It's sour, minty, and bracing, like drinking carbonated regret. But it's cold and strangely refreshing. The woman laughs at your face. First time. You nod, cheeks puckering. They used to flavor it with dried rose petals, she says, or ground cucumber. My grandmother froze it into popsicles once. Gourmet before it was cool. Literally. From her, you learn that certain foods were reserved for ice season. Summer recipes required planning in winter. Pickled lemons with ice, she says, taste like a poem, but only if the ice is ours, not from a machine. You sit outside as the sun begins to droop westward. There's a slow procession of donkeys, each carrying baskets covered with burlap. Ice delivery time. The slabs harvested last night are heading to markets down in the plains. The donkeys wear bells. The rhythm is hypnotic. You trail behind half out of curiosity, half just enjoying the pace. It's a slow, deliberate ballet. At a midway stop shaded by olive trees, the traders pause to check the cargo. The ice wrapped in straw and packed snugly shows little melt. They splash some water on a stone to test its sizzles, still cold enough. One man offers you a chunk. You carry it, see how long you last. Challenge accepted. He places the ice slab in your arms. It's heavier than expected, like holding a frozen loaf of bread. Made of steel. You walk 20 meters before your shirt begins sticking, your arms trembling. The ice burns your forearms in reverse. You give up. They laugh gently, not unkindly. City hand, someone teases. Probably true. You sit on a rock and watch them move again, a little humbled, a lot impressed. There's poetry in the system, from frozen trench to packed dome, to merchant cellar to donkey cart to iced doog in the village square. A cycle of patience. No apps, no urgency, just timing and trust. You think about your fridge at home, the hum. It makes the electricity it drains. You think about everything it can't do, like make summer taste like rose water, or keep a community in sync by sharing coldness as a gift. Maybe that's the real magic, not the cold itself, but the ritual of chasing it, catching it, and handing it over, slab by careful slab. You're back near the original yakchal by late afternoon. The dome now casts a long shadow, its cooling trench in shade, and the ice inside remarkably still solid, barely sweating. You sit against the curved base, the earth cool against your spine, and listen as your guide tells you the next part of the story. Did you know, he begins, that Persians weren't the only ones using ice like this, but we might have done it longest, and the most beautifully. You raise an eyebrow. Bold claim. But he's not wrong. Ancient Greeks toyed with snow pits. The Chinese had ice houses. Romans used snow packed in straw. But the Persian system, underground, self-sustaining, beautifully integrated into city planning, was something else entirely. And now he says you need to see the blueprints. Yes, blueprints, or at least something like them. You're led into a dim archive room just off a community hall that smells of saffron, chalk dust, and time. Inside, wall scrolls, dusty tomes, and brittle diagrams etched in faded ink. One parchment pinned gently under glass shows a side view of a yakchal, cross-sectioned like a giant lemon. You see everything: angle of the trench insulation layers, the vent shaft that runs from top to ice basin. And arrows everywhere. This one's from 1740, the keeper says, but based on older models. There are measurement notations and units you don't recognize. Cubits, fathoms, goat length. You squint. Someone's drawn a pair of little men hauling ice blocks up a ramp, both of them smiling and inexplicably wearing hats shaped like onions. Your guide chuckles, not for scale, just decoration. Fair enough. Another scroll reveals detailed insulation techniques. Not just mud and straw, there's also ash-crushed pottery shards and even pulverized charcoal. Each layer serving a purpose to repel heat trap, cool, resist moisture, or simply discourage insects. Historians still argue whether this multi-layer insulation was discovered by accident, trial and error, or if some ancient builder had an intuitive grasp of thermodynamics before it was even a word. Either way, it worked spectacularly. The keeper hands you a translation of a poem. This was written about a yakchal, he says, to be read aloud at summer festivals. You read the opening lines. Beneath the dust a treasure sleeps, more precious than saffron or gold. The night gives it breath, the sun gives it purpose. You stop. That's it, you realize. That's the key. The Persians didn't just fight the desert, they danced with it. They didn't hate the sun. They used its cycles. They waited for night. They harnessed wind. They outlasted the heat rather than outrunning it. It's passive brilliance, almost lazy genius. The kind that doesn't roar, just works. You're shown an ancient inventory ledger from a town that once had 3 yakchals. It records who received ice on which days for what purpose: medical use ceremonies. Food preservation. And get this, fines for unauthorized early access to the dome. Yep, ice crimes. Somebody was sneaking summer desserts before their time. The punishment, a day of extra trench cleaning, cold justice. As you leave the archive, your mind is full of quiet awe. This wasn't a novelty, it was infrastructure. It shaped diets, health architecture, even social rituals. And it worked. Until it didn't. Your guide's voice drops. We lost most of the yakchals in the last 100 years. Electricity, concrete imports, modern freezers, they all chipped away at the old systems. A few domes collapsed, some were converted into garages or inexplicably chicken coops. People forgot, he says. They forgot how smart the ancestors were. You sit in silence, the evening creeping in, and wonder how much genius have we paved over? How many elegant ideas lost in our rush to modernize, to digitize, to automate? You glance back at the dome, still standing, still cold, still waiting to be remembered. The air has changed. It's dusk now, and the village is turning that soft golden color you only get in stories or oil paintings. The dome of the Yakchal seems to glow from within like a sleeping creature exhaling cold. You wander toward the small courtyard where a few elders are seated on woven mats, sharing tea brewed strong and dark in a pot older than any of them. You're waved in without ceremony. No one asks your name. You're just included. The tea is poured into small glasses, and a dish of rock sugar is passed around. No ice in sight this time, just warmth, conversation, and the gentle creak of age-old wooden chairs. One of the elders, a man with eyebrows like feather dusters, launches into a story in Farsi. Your guide translates and whispers. It's about a winter too warm when no ice formed at all. The village panicked. They thought the gods were punishing them, the elder says. Turned out the insulation trench had collapsed. A goat fell in. You suppress a laugh, the goat again. Apparently there was an emergency town meeting, followed by a ceremonial trench cleansing. Offerings were made, mostly dried dates and awkward apologies, and the trench rebuilt sturdier than before. The elder chuckles. The goat was fine, but very clean. Someone else joins in, telling of a wedding that had to be delayed until the groom could chisel enough ice to keep the custard from spoiling. It took him 3 days. But the bride waited, they say proudly. True love is cold storage. This isn't just nostalgia. These are survival tactics wrapped in folklore. A woman with henned hands speaks up next. Her voice is quiet, but the room stills to hear it. She tells how her grandmother used ice to treat fevers before aspirin was common. She would wrap it in goat wool, of course, and place it under the child's neck. Not too long, just until the sweating stopped. Historians still debate whether these makeshift ice therapies were medically effective or simply symbolic comfort. But there's no doubt people believed in them, and often belief is the stronger medicine. Someone pulls out a wooden box and opens it slowly, reverently. Inside are old brass molds, tiny cups with scalloped edges. Ice treats, your guide murmurs. Think of them as ancient popsicle forms. Into these villagers would press flavored slush pomegranate rosewater or sour orange, then freeze them deep in the dome overnight. In summer, children race to the Yakchal for first pick. You ask how they prevented stealing. Everyone laughs. They didn't. Children always steal sweets. Fair enough. You run your fingers over one of the molds. It's beautifully worn. 1,000 tiny hands must have gripped it in excitement. You can almost hear the crunch of frozen syrup, the giggles, the sharp intake of breath when that cold hit the tongue. This dome held more than just ice. It held anticipation. Your guide leans in. You're seeing it now, aren't you? Why it mattered. Yes, absolutely. It wasn't just a method, it was a rhythm. The Yakchal gave people something to look forward to. Something earned. Something shared. And something fleeting. The elders rise slowly, their stories told, their tea finished. You help stack the cushions, and one pats your back like you're a grandson. Another gives you a leftover rock sugar cube. For the road, he says, though, you're not going anywhere tonight. As the stars start to emerge, you lie back on a carpet laid out beside the dome. The Yakchal looms above, silent and content. Around you, cicadas start up their soft, electric whir. A few children chase shadows near the trench, tossing pebbles, daring each other to get close. The temperature has dropped. You can feel the earth exhale cool through your bones. Someone brings out a bowl of chilled melon slices, and you nibble one, its sweetness deepened by contrast. You close your eyes, not quite ready to sleep, but perfectly willing to drift. And you realize there's something deeply comforting in knowing that cold, ancient knowledge like this still hums beneath the modern buzz. that even now, somewhere in the world, someone is laying straw over a frozen slab by starlight, waiting, trusting the desert to do its part. Not magic, just memory made visible. By morning, the village is awake in its own slow way, doors creaking open, donkeys clopping past, a kettle whistling in the distance like a bird with indigestion. You sit up stiff but rested and notice a boy already walking toward the yakchal with a small metal pail and a determined expression. Time for the daily harvest. Your guide joins you, brushing dust off his robes. Want to help? Obviously. The dome seems even grander in daylight. Every curve casts a sharp line, every mud brick joint visible. It's not smooth, not polished, but solid. Time-worn and dignified like the calluses on an old carpenter's hand. Together you descend the narrow steps into the trench. The cold hits instantly dry, unassuming like the breath of a thoughtful librarian. You follow the boy's practiced movements. He taps the ice gently with a flat chisel, then chips away a section into the pail. You're offered a turn, you try, you fail. Ice resists you with gentle sass. Ice prefers those who know how to listen, the boy says solemnly, like he's quoting a proverb. Maybe he is. You finally manage a chunk, jagged, pale, and proud. You hold it up to the morning light. It's like a little time machine. This water fell from the sky months ago, maybe longer, and now it's resurfacing, changed but intact. You help carry the pail, back up hands, freezing through the handle. The boy runs ahead, laughing. Kids immune to discomfort, obsessed with puddles. The ice is delivered to a nearby cafe, a modest stall with 3 low stools, a canvas awning, and a counter that's seen better centuries. The cafe owner, who might be twice as old as the yakshal, accepts the ice like a priest receiving an offering. It's dropped into a wide bowl of yogurt drink duke, chilled to perfection. A sprig of mint, a clink of ceramic. You're handed a cup. You sip. It is no exaggeration the most refreshing thing you've ever tasted. Like drinking a breeze? Like swallowing an apology from the sun. As customers gather, you ask how long this cafe has been operating. The owner shrugs. Since before cars. That tracks. And the ice still better from the dome, he says. The freezer makes it too bitter. You raise an eyebrow. Bitter. He nods. Electricity has flavor. Old air doesn't. You decide not to argue. You just sip. Historians still debate whether pre-industrial ice truly tasted different, or if it was the context that flavored it. The anticipation, the scarcity, the stories. You walk around the village, stopping at a tiny bathhouse that still uses melted dome ice to cool foot basins. The custodian explains the system. Ice is floated in clay tubs beside the hot pools, giving bathers both extremes. Cold water makes the warm water warmer, she says. It's all about balance. Balance, again that word. So much of Persian ingenuity comes down to harmony between elements, between seasons, between human need and environmental patience. At the schoolhouse, a wall mural catches your eye, a child's painting of the yakchal with little smiley faces coming out of it. One is definitely wearing sunglasses. The caption says in Persian and English, "Our ice house is older than your grandpa." Fair enough. You speak to a teacher who explains how children are still taught the principles of the dome, its geometry, its insulation logic, its cultural role. They build scale models from cardboard and mud, sometimes competing to see which model stays coldest after an hour in the sun. The winner gets the last chilled rosewater cookie. High stakes. Back at the yakchal, a small tour group has gathered. They're urban Iranians visiting roots. One older woman says she remembers fetching ice from a dome like this when she was 6. We didn't think it was special, she says. It was just there, like the moon. You sit on the steps again, feeling the sun creep closer. Noontime heat begins its slow attack, but the dome remains unmoved. Inside, the ice barely notices. The boy returns this time with a smaller pail. More deliveries, he announces, his chisels tucked into a makeshift belt holster. He's got this. You watch him go pale, swinging sure-footed and grinning. And you realize the yakchal isn't a relic. It's still a tool, a rhythm, a lesson. It didn't vanish. It adapted. Or rather, it waited for us to realize it never needed fixing. Sometimes the smartest technology is a dome of mud and straw holding winter in its belly. You find yourself returning to the dome without even thinking. Like a homing pigeon, or maybe just someone who's finally learned how to walk in the desert without needing a destination. There's an odd comfort in its silence. You stand before the yakchal and realize you know it now. Not just the facts or the angles, but the feel of it. The rhythm. the quiet heartbeat of cold beneath sun. A woman waves you over. She's carrying a basket of what looks like old parchments. Curiosity wins. Turns out they're not parchments. They're ancient recipe scrolls, sort of. Sheets of pressed plant pulp with fading ink stored in a cedar box that smells like 600-year-old incense and secrets. She unrolls one carefully. It's a sorbet recipe from the Qajar era. Instructions for freezing sweetened almond milk using dome-harvested ice and dried plum essence. You're stunned. It's precise, poetic, and weirdly relatable. You want to try it? She asks. You nod before she even finishes. You help her set up a small clay churn. The ingredients are simple milk syrup, crushed dried fruit, but the key is the method. A metal bowl sits inside a larger basin filled with dome-chipped ice and salt. The salt helps draw heat out faster. You stir slowly in one direction only. Clockwise keeps the sweetness in, she teases. Whether that's science or superstition, you obey. The mixture thickens gently, not with a dramatic flourish, but with patience, like trust or soup. You taste it with your pinky. It's absurdly good. Sweet, tangy, cold as desert wind at dawn. The woman beams like you just passed a secret test. Historians still argue whether these recipes were meant for royals or for festivals, she says, licking the spoon. But I think everyone deserves ice like this. You agree, even though your tongue's gone slightly numb. Later, as the day burns brighter, you follow a group of schoolchildren heading out to study shadows. Their teacher is explaining how the angle of sunlight helped ancient builders orient domes for maximum efficiency. One kid interrupts. So, it's like a solar panel made of dirt. The teacher smiles. Yes, but older and tastier. The whole group laughs. It's striking how this place teaches through doing. Through flavor and feeling and funny little side comments that somehow stay in your head longer than lectures ever did. You think about the paradox again, building something so enduring to protect something that melts. And yet it's not a paradox, it's a promise. Because what matters isn't just the preservation, it's the sharing. The ability to take something fleeting and stretch it through time community ritual. That night a wedding unfolds near the dome. String lights sway between date palms. A fire crackles. The couple, young, awkward, glowing, stand beside a ceremonial bowl of ice drawn that morning from the dome. They dip their hands in it together, then dry them on the same cloth. No one explains the gesture. They don't have to. You find a seat under a fig tree. Someone offers you a frozen rose petal, delicate, perfumed, pressed in sugar. You take it. You savor it. You watch as the couple dances surrounded by people who know exactly why this strange mud dome, this backwards-looking technology still matters. Not just for nostalgia, not for charm, for continuity, for care, for the cool, quiet act of saying we remember how to wait for winter even in the middle of the heat. And we remember how to pass it on. You wake early, long before the sun crests the horizon, to the sound of soft sweeping, someone tidying the path outside the yakchal. The sky is still the deep, dreamy blue of a half-remembered nap, stars fading with mild reluctance. Slipping on your sandals, you step outside. The dome looms gently against the coming dawn, already catching whispers of gold along its ridges. A man you haven't met before is brushing the steps with a palm broom. Morning cleaning, he says, nodding politely. The dome deserves respect. You nod back quietly, agreeing. The village is quiet, but not asleep. Roosters beginning to chime in, someone yawning behind a shutter. You stroll toward the dome one last time, each step slower than the last, like you're walking through molasses made of nostalgia. Inside, the air is still startlingly cold. The ice is thinner now, harvested in chunks over the past week. A soft sheen of meltwater clings to the floor, seeping into ancient drainage grooves cut by hand before anyone here was born. You crouch, running your fingers along the wall. It's not smooth textured with years, like a diary that's been thumbed too often. Bits of straw poke through the clay as if to remind you this was never meant to be perfect. Just effective. Just lasting. Someone once called Persian engineering the poetry of problem solving. That phrase hums through your thoughts now louder than the quiet. Because what is the yakchal if not a poem? A stubborn, sunlit poem that holds snow in its stanzas. You picture the people who built it barefoot, sweating, laughing, not knowing their work would outlast kingdoms. They didn't build it for legacy. They built it because their kids needed cold milk in July. Historians still debate how widespread yakchals were, whether every village had one or only the wealthier trade towns. But standing here, you realize even one was enough. One dome, one cold promise keeping winter alive in the middle of a sunburnt plain. You touch the ice. Not because it's impressive, not because it's rare, but because it's still here, still holding on, still giving. Outside, the sun climbs. The dome begins its silent defense, pushing heat away, pulling coolness inward, waging the quietest war ever fought. And it will win in its own soft earthen way. As the morning unfolds, you walk the village one last time. Faces are familiar now, smiles. Slower. Greetings warmer. You nod at the boy with the chisel. He grins, holds up a perfect ice shard, then pretends to eat it like a carrot. You laugh despite yourself. A final stop at the cafe, another dough, this one pink with pomegranate. The same cold, the same gentle clink. You sit on the same stool and watch the dome from afar, just part of the backdrop now. An old friend who doesn't need to speak to be understood. And when it's time to leave, you walk past it one last time. You don't touch it. You just glance at it, and it seems to nod back. There's nothing left to say, but there's everything left to remember. Now let's slow it all down. The wind down 300 words. So now as we settle into the stillness of sleep, let's return to the dome one final time. Not as travelers, but as quiet observers in the hush of twilight. The air cools, gently curling around the base of the yakshal like a cat finding its place. Crickets begin their rhythmic lullaby, and somewhere nearby a donkey exhales with the slow drama of someone who's survived another desert day. In the fading light, the dome doesn't shine or dazzle. It just exists serene, unbothered, like a mountain that's decided to be useful. The last of the day's warmth lingers on the outer wall, but inside the ice is unhurried, patient. It knows what it's for. You can picture it, can't you? The soft clink of metal pails, the gentle hush of feet on dust, the way even laughter sounds quieter near such an old, cold place. Let that image hold you now. Let it remind you that not everything valuable must be new. That quiet work done well and done often can outlast empires. That even in the fiercest heat, there are pockets of calm reservoirs of cool if we just build them with care. So close your eyes now and feel the coolness of that dome spreading out through the air over your skin, through your breath. Slow, still, steady, like the yakshal, always waiting, always there. Good night.